If you do, come check up afterwards, because those of us that don't have anything, I know would be happy to sign. Some people have to get to other things, so we can play that by ear. So hang in there on that. Were you going to give a ticket?
Yeah, however you want to do it, now or later.
Okay. I wonder if it's useful to just pass that around, or would
Okay.
get you on wheels?
Oh, you know what? As long as they take the time. Oh, you'll do it?
Okay. Jeanine is giving away some advanced copies. That's what
Yeah. I have 4 of these. If you want a chance to win, get a ticket from Debbie. No. Keep just give the top ones, and then I'll keep the bottoms.
So Debbie will give these away throughout the whole audience while we're chatting about characters and things. And let's see. This should be 50 minutes long. We'll leave some time at the end for just kind of free-for-all questions if there are things you want to ask. Oh, look how short this is. Okay. Anyways, I'm Richelle Mead. I'm the moderator of this. We are talking about kick-ass characters in urban fantasy. So hopefully that's what you came here to hear. And rather than me introducing these ladies, I will let them kick things off and tell you about themselves, what they write, and we will go from there. So, Jeanne, would you like to be at the unfortunate spot right next to me? I'll alternate.
My name is Jeanne Stein, and I write the End Strong Vampire Chronicles, and the 8th book comes out.
Yay!
I'm Chloe Neill. I write the Chicagoland Vampire series. And thank you for supporting me after Hard Bitten. And the next book comes out on August 7th. I'm writing the 7th book right now.
I'm Jeanine Frost. I write the Night Huntress series. And the upcoming Night Prince series, which is with Vlad.
Yay! My name is Christina Henry, and I write the Madeline Black series, the Black Wing series, which is set here in Chicago for any of you locals.
That's how you're going to say it. I'm Charlaine Harris. I write the Sookie Stackhouse novels.
Is there someone sitting there? No.
Jeez, I should have made you guys.
Aren't you sitting there? 5, 6, 7. Take one and pass it along.
It's all right. We can get into that because actually, the first thing I'm going to ask, and we'll go down the line with this one, and then after that, you guys can jump in as you want to on the other questions. Since we're talking about characters and what makes them stand out, what makes them unique in this genre, what I'd like to do is just have each of you pick a character, a main-ish character, and tell us, what is unique about them, what you like about them, why, obviously if you write about this person a lot, there must be something that really stands out to you. So just tell us a little bit, if that makes sense, someone you like, what's great about them. And we'll start with Charlaine this time.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to avoid the obvious because I don't think Sookie is exactly kick-ass. I mean, she's certainly capable of fighting, but she doesn't go out looking for it. I think Pam is definitely
Yeah.
She actually enjoys ripping people's arms off. And she will certainly go looking for a fight, and she terrifies even other vampires because she's such a vicious fighter. So I really enjoy writing Pam. She's so sarcastic, and she's so secretive because, believe me, she's got secrets. And we're going to find out some of those.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
So I really love writing her. Anytime I can work her into the narrative, I do.
All right.
My main character, Madeline Black, is an agent of death, and she finds out in the first book that she's the daughter of a fallen angel, and she's the kind of character who does not seek trouble, but trouble definitely finds her. And it's been sort of interesting for me to write this character because as she gets more reluctant to engage, more and more stuff shows up at her door. So that dichotomy is sort of interesting for me to play with as a writer, someone who really doesn't want to be a hero, but kind of has to be.
The main character in my Night Hunter series is Kat Caulfield, and she starts out the series as just about as narrow-minded, stubborn, and in some ways reckless with a death wish as you find. And what I like about her is, although she makes a ton of mistakes, and she does, oh so many, is that she really, she will acknowledge that they are mistakes, at least definitely now in the series, and she does try and learn from them. In the beginning, she really thought the world was black and white, and she was forced to learn about all the different shades of gray, not just about the people around her, but herself. And I like that she does grow from that, and she really does try to learn. Even when she doesn't learn as fast as she should, you want to slap her, so do I, she really tries to do better next time. So I admire that about her.
Merritt is the heroine of the Chicagoland Vampire series.
You all sing this song.
You're going to make my accent come out. She is a 28-year-old former graduate student who lives in Chicago. She is now Sentinel of Cadogan House, which is one of 3 vampire houses in Chicago. My theory as a reader, I guess first and foremost, is that any heroine, or at least the heroines I want to read, need to be 50% kind of relatable and 50% aspirational. So at least half of her I need to totally get and imagine myself in her shoes, and half of it I need to imagine what I want to be doing or what I wish to be doing, or the exits I wish I could make in real life. So I like that, I hope certainly that I'm able to make her have qualities that other people relate to. She's been in school, she has family issues, she has trouble with her boss. She's really sarcastic, she loves food, but she also is able to enjoy strange and fantastical situations and hopefully come out happily on the other end of them.
And my protagonist, Anna Strong, is a vampire in the series. And she was made a vampire through an act of violence. So, because all of the books take place in such a short period of time, it's all about 18 months. The series involves Anna's transitioning from a mortal to a vampire, and how her relationships between the humans that are still in her life and then the new creatures, the new thing. I wasn't prepared for this question. I wish you had. You should have started with me and then with anyway, so the basis of the series really is Anna's adjustment to becoming a vampire, and the relationships between the mortals that are still in her life. So that's basically what. And I like everyone else here. I love the character. I love writing the character. It's just so much fun. And what you said about aspirations is so true, because there's a human side of her, and then there's the other worldly side of her, which are always a constant challenge. But I think that's kind of relates to real life too. We always have challenges in our life, and most of them are not as monumental as the characters in our stories portray. But that's one of the things that I hope that readers can relate to.
Great. Okay, these questions you guys can all feel free to answer or jump in, battle it out. I wish we had a microphone, because that's always like the universal symbol of whose turn it is. We'll just muddle through the best we can. So my next question about characters, urban fantasy is really known for having these strong, kick-ass, as the title suggests, characters. Is there an important trait you think that really goes into making a strong character, or at least the way you define strong? Because sometimes strong isn't always punching someone in the face, sometimes it is. So for you, at least in your writing, what are some qualities you want to put in there to make your characters strong? Yeah.
I think the one differentiation, I love the term kick-ass, but I think it's different from badass, and I think a lot of times people get that confused, because I think, as one of our panelists already mentioned, my character doesn't go looking for fights, but she won't turn away from a fight that she thinks is a justifiable one too. And I think that's a difference in that.
Merit tries to be brave, and brave in the classical sense, meaning you are scared shitless of something, but you're going to do it anyways. And I admire that quality about her because, I mean, she knows she may not be equipped, she knows she might get in trouble for it, but she has a very strong sense of right and wrong, and even if she's not sure the consequences are going to be good, she's going to do her best to kind of push through whatever action she needs to take.
Kat starts out looking for fights for reasons of revenge and not real intelligence. But she grows to where then the fights she takes on aren't ones that she's seeking out, but ones that she feels morally she needs to be involved in because, you know, if not, bad things are going to happen. And she does fight a lot physically. She has that ability, but to touch upon what Richelle said, there was another character that I really, really liked writing about who was Kira, and she didn't really have the physical, she could take care of herself, but she didn't have any of Kat's physical abilities, but she had emotional strength, and her emotional strength at times turned out to be more powerful than the strength of the hero, who was a 4,500-year-old telekinetic vampire that could, you know, throw people around with his mind. And his emotional strength was shattered, and hers wasn't, and she was able to help win fights just with her inner will and her inner sense of, you know, that things were going to be okay. He was horribly depressed. She wasn't. So that can be invaluable in a fight, too. Hope can be invaluable.
I think that survival is like the trait that I try to bring out most in Maddie, and that's not just surviving the fight, but surviving what happens after the fight. Because you don't engage in a battle, say, with a demon, and then think you can go home and like have a pizza and everything's going to be fine, because something else is going to come knocking at your door. So I think that like, emotional survival is probably the most important trait that she has, not just her ability to physically survive a fight.
I think Suki's strength lies in her determination to try to do the right thing. That's not always an obvious choice. So I think she has to do a lot of soul searching to establish what the right thing is. But once she decides what that is, she sticks with it. And I think that's really admirable in the face of as much adversity as she's had to face.
Okay, next question. And since there really isn't a microphone to indicate, you want me to just keep calling on people randomly and we'll go down the list? Is that easier for you guys? All right. If you don't want to answer, you can just say pass or whatever. Hopefully these really aren't that tough. So urban fantasy seems to have a reputation for anti-heroes, the person who's really jaded about the world, and is not necessarily the good, shining, you know, knight in armor, or nitrous, is that a word? I don't know. What is your take on that, just as far as the kind of characters you like to write? Do you like kind of that dark and perfect character? Do you want someone who kind of inspires people? Because sometimes it isn't always a great thing to be so jaded about the world. This is just kind of an out there question about what you like to write and what you think helps carry your story. And we can start with you, Chloe.
Man, that's a tough one.
Oh.
My books are, there's a lot of sarcasm, so they are urban fantasy, but I think they're a little bit on the lighter side because Merritt's voice is pretty sarcastic, and she uses humor, I think, as a defense mechanism a lot. I guess she's an anti-hero only in the sense that she's not always good at her job. I mean, it's more of a skill issue than she really is evil, but she tries to be good. I think Ethan Sullivan, who's the primary male protagonist, probably falls into that category a little easier because he is so political and so strategic, and sometimes his attempt to make political strategic decisions blinds him to what her emotional needs are. But I like people who are interesting that I would want to sit down and have a conversation with. And there certainly are characters in the book who are troubled more so than others, but I don't know that in my books that's necessarily something that I'm kind of conscious of, or that I try to write consciously. I just try to, I don't know, make them people I would want to talk to. Oh, okay.
I think it depends on the story and the characters, how you have them. In my first book, my heroine was the broody, troubled, dark one per se, and my hero was, he had gotten over most of his baggage. He was happy being a vampire. He didn't want to turn back, and he was really chipper, even when killing people. So in that case, it wasn't, the female bringing, the dark male back from the brink. He was bringing her back from the brink. But I also like a broody male. In one of my other books, Mencheris was really broody and really, it opens, he tries to kill himself. You don't get much more broody than that. And in that case, it was the female who didn't have that kind of emotional baggage going on. So it really depends on the story and the character. I don't think that every anti-hero or hero needs to be in a cookie-cutter mold. And it's whatever works best with them, and also at the time. In one book, a character can be one way, 4 books later, they can have something else going on. So it has to fit their personality, and I think it should fit the story.
I don't think that Maddie is necessarily an anti-hero, but her many greats-grandfather is Lucifer. He pretty much qualifies as the ultimate anti-hero.
But he's nice. I like Lucifer.
The great thing about writing him as a character is that you never really know what he's thinking.
But you still like him.
And well, you're supposed to like him. For a little while at least.
Oh, I like to write in shades of gray. I've never met a person who was all good or all evil. Met some who were pretty close. But I think it's more fun to write a complex person who has both good sides, bad sides, flaws, and shining virtues. I think that's just more interesting to me than to try to write a superhero.
One of the things I had to decide on when I decided that I was going to make my protagonist the vampire was I wanted her to have a strong job. Kind of like before she became a vampire, she was a bounty hunter. So this is no shrinking violet. So it wasn't like there was going to be, she was going to go from Susie Homemaker to a vampire. She was a tough female before she was made, and that didn't change after she became a vampire. So, I guess, by the time I came down here, I'd kind of forgotten what
I've had that happen before. You never know what you're answering by the end.
I noticed too that Charlaine has one of your tickets. If Charlaine has one of your tickets, I want one of yours.
We'll work it out.
You guys made me lose my place. All right.
Oh, sorry.
No. I find often when I'm writing that one of the ways I characterize people or how I learn more about a character is how they relate to other characters. And especially in urban fantasy, there's always, romance is always such a hot issue, with people. There's always people talk about the romances in this genre. So I guess what I just want to know is, tell us about a character, tell us about a relationship in your book, and it doesn't have to be the main character if it's sides, but basically what I'm interested in is explain why these two are a match. If this is your strong character, what is it about this other person that kind of makes them interesting? Is the other person strong and so they're a power team? Does one save the other? What is it that kind of balances them out? I hope that I'm kind of talking around in circles. Charlaine, you want to go?
I do. I want to talk about Tara and J.B. Durand because he is very simple, and she is very complex, and she deliberately picks him to marry because they were childhood friends and outcasts together, and she knows she's going to have to spend her whole life telling him what to do. But for her, that gives her the control she needs in the relationship. And she's settling for him. But I still think it'll be a pretty happy marriage. because they're both getting what they need from it, even if it's not what we would think of as a really healthy, balanced relationship. That's not what they need. They need an imbalanced relationship that works for them, and that's what they're getting.
So Maddie, who's my main character, when she finds out that she's the daughter of a fallen angel, she basically finds out that she's like royalty socially. And of course, the person she falls in love with is basically like a servant, like a person that she could never, ever, 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 ever be allowed to be with. So as a writer, it makes it nice and easy. You just put up like a huge roadblock, and then you can have lots of angst and longing, sort of like Buffy and Angel, like yes but no, yes but no.
I'll mention my characters in the upcoming book because, as I've said before, I'm a fickle author, and whoever I'm writing about is my favorite. Vlad and Layla. Vlad has been introduced in the series, and he is based on the historical character of Vlad Tepes, not the Dracula version. And he, you know, has a long and dark history, and in the books he's presented as a bit jaded with kind of a twisted sense of humor, but brutally honest as well. And when I was thinking of the heroine, I knew there had to be more than she's hot, because that would be of little interest to him. So what he's drawn to with her is her inner darkness. She has a psychic ability where she touches a person, she'll see their worst sin, which is just about, I think, the most horrible thing you could have, because I wouldn't want to know any one of you people's worst sins, and to be forced to know everyone's. And it almost broke her mentally, but she got over it, and she's dealing with it. And so he is attracted to her ability to handle darkness and to see the worst of it, because he's very familiar with that. And that was the middle ground that they met on, despite him being centuries old and her being not centuries old, a human. That was the level. And in some ways, she's drawn to the darkness in him at first. It's something that, you know, has repelled her in other ways, but in him, it's strangely attracting. So I think with every character relationship, you have to find something to meet aside from physical attraction, because a lot of people are physically attractive. There has to be more.
I will talk about Ethan, Sullivan, and Merritt, who are kind of the current main romantic entanglement in the Chicagoland Vampires books. Initially, they had the physical attraction, and there was not really much else, mainly because they consider, in a Pride and Prejudice kind of way, each other to be their polar opposites. Merritt sees Ethan as cold and unfeeling and overly political, and Ethan, I think, sees Merritt as someone who doesn't understand, who hasn't been around long enough, and kind of doesn't understand the ramifications of her actions or the pressures that he's under to keep his vampires safe. He's master of Cadogan House, or was, kind of is. It's kind of complicated. But I think there's a sense that as they got to know each other, they help each other, and this sounds really trite, but they really do help each other become more well-rounded, fuller people. Merritt learns that even though her background is academic and she's good with books and she likes to read and she has sequestered herself for much of her life, she can be more social and she can be braver, and he helps her do that. At the same time, I think she helps him recognize something very human in himself that in 400 years of vampire existence he has kind of put in a drawer and stopped thinking about. So, and of course that is the source of their trouble as well, because they do come from such different perspectives and their lives have been so different. But my goal in the long run is for her to have a happy ever after, you know, with the character growth that comes with a complicated but fulfilling relationship.
Well, Anna has not had very good luck with men. Her boyfriend, she's either kicked them off, scared them off, or pissed them off. So she hasn't had a lasting relationship. However, because the 9th book, it will probably be the last Anna book. We're kind of wrapping things up. There is hope. Anna's going to have a relationship, and it's going to be a fulfilling relationship for her. So it's fun to write. It's really fun to write, because this is the first time that I've allowed her to, you know, to actually fall in love with someone. And even my editors said, you know, it's about time to give Anna a break. So, I am.
She suffered enough
Yes.
for now, until the spin-off. And
Yeah.
you can bring in some more. So very often, even if you're a plotter, things can always change from how you expect when you start off to write a book or even a character. So this next question, has there been a character that sticks in your mind that just really changed from what you had intended as you started writing? I'm always a little nervous when people tell me, this character made me do things. I don't want to quite go there, but has there been a character you've suddenly been in the middle and been like, wow, this was not what I thought this character was going to be. They've changed or grown in a way you didn't expect. And the second part of the question is just, how did you feel about that? Did you like this, that it was a surprise, or did it ruin your plans? Thoughts on characters changing? Oh, you're sitting next to everyone looks at you. I need to call on someone else.
No, that's okay. Well, Eric changed a lot. He was pretty much an asshole. A handsome one, but still, I didn't see the charm at all. And the more I wrote him, the more I saw that he had a sense of humor, which I always like, and he was not as rigid in his thinking as he first appeared, and also I've got to say, readers reacted to him much more strongly than I ever expected, and I'm going, oh, okay. So I thought, well, let me just keep looking at him, and he got more and more complex. I just hadn't counted on that at all.
When I first started writing Some Girls Bite, and I don't know that I've ever said this out loud, I maintain and still do maintain that once I understood the arc of the story, I had a sense that Ethan was kind of the main protagonist. But when I first started writing Some Girls Bite, the first scene that I wrote involving another vampire was Morgan, and I was fairly confident that Merritt would pick him. But Merritt did not pick him, and I don't know that I had any, I'm sure I had something to do with it, but the chemistry between the two of them as people, intellectually and emotionally, changed, and he grew more than I expected him to, which was interesting. Although I think the person who surprised me the most has been Mallory, who is Merritt's kind of the sidekick. She's a newly discovered sorceress in her own right, a former ad executive, who in Drink Deep, beginning in Hard Bitten, and then which is book 4, and then Drink Deep, which is book 5, begins to experience an addiction to black magic that changes her considerably, and that was not something that I had originally imagined to go through. I mean, she's a complex person. She has never been as comfortable with the magical world or paranormal as Merritt has, but I did not expect that she would have the trouble dealing with it that she has, or that popped up in those books.
I think for me, the character that has kind of come up, and the character that I get more requests for readers to know more about is Culebra. And he's the shapeshifter that runs the bar where Anna goes to be, a Mexican bar. And so the book that's coming out in August, Vinted, is actually his story. So it was kind of fun to have a character that was supposed to be just a bit actor, and then actually turns out to be more involved in the stories than I planned.
I'll go. I think Ian, when I originally started writing the second book, I thought, I was pretty sure he was going to die. And at first it was going to be that my heroine was going to kill him. And then, then I thought Bones might kill him. And he lived. And to me, he was very villainous in that book. And I slowly, through other books, saw that there was more to him than just the terrible person I kind of thought he was. He still does terrible things. And I mean, I get a lot of requests for a book, and if I ever write one about it, it'll be warning. If you're dating someone like this, get help. Because, I mean, he still is appalling in many ways. But as I've written him, I've realized he has reasons behind the appalling behavior and different depths to, underneath that. And so maybe one day he will still be appalling, but fairly more redeemable appalling. We'll see.
I don't have a character that that changed on me, but I have a character that my editor asked me to change. I thought that he would be a really bad guy. He's the fiance, the unwanted fiance of my main character. And when I wrote the second book, she said, can we just make it so that he's a little bit redeemable? And so I went back and I changed a few things, and now, weirdly, he has a fan club, which kind of bothers me, because I thought he was the really bad guy, but apparently he's lovable.
No.
I'm going to jump my own order here because a couple of things got touched on, which I was going to ask about later. People mentioned side characters that you originally thought were just going to have a small role, and then suddenly they've grown and become other things. So part of this panel, aside from just discussing character in general, is advice for aspiring writers out there. What advice would you give for people with side characters? How do you make them be more than just walk-on roles or two-dimensional? Because that's very easy to do, to have kind of the stock neighbor or bad guy. What can you do? What advice would you give to writers?
Okay. I would say, and this is something my editor reminds me of constantly, because apparently I don't do a very good job of it, but I'll tell you guys, you know. Figure out what your character's motivations are. That counts for the main character, for the bad guys or bad girls, and for the side, you know, kind of the sidekick characters. I believe, because again, this is how I like to read, that if I can't imagine myself as the heroine, then I at least need to imagine myself as the heroine's sidekick. So I try to make both of them, even if one is the one mainly on stage, I try to make the second one kind of equally relatable, but also aspirational. So that's typically a female, because most of my readers are women, within the same age range, but a little bit different than the main character. But it's important to know who they are and what they want as much as it is for the main character, because the sidekick can be a foil, they can be someone who is helping or undermining what the main character is doing, and I think it's important to know 10 books down the road or 20 years from now what they want out of life and how those decisions are going to impact what the main character does along the way.
Keep going down, sorry.
Oh, okay, all right. I think it's important to remember that your characters don't know they're not real. And they also don't know that they're not side characters and they're not in the spotlight. So when writing, I try and know as much as I can about the side characters as I do about the main characters, because they have their own stories. They're in that position in the book because of events in their lives brought them there. And so even though I don't get to show 90% of what I know about the side characters in the book, I think it's important for me to know it, or otherwise they can come across as cardboard placeouts, and I try to make them not to. And also then you have to balance that with not info dumping a whole bunch of information about them that just slows down the plot and has nothing to do with what's going on with your hero and heroine. But even if you can only sprinkle a little bit of details here and there, if you don't know it, the reader doesn't know it, and then that character is window dressing.
The sidekick in my books is an overweight gargoyle who eats a lot of junk food. And I came up with him because when you write in first person, there's a danger that you're going to get trapped inside your character's head. And I wanted a character that would always be present for the heroine. Like a roommate or a spouse or somebody like that would presumably have their own life and not always be there when you wanted to have some expositionary dialogue. But a gargoyle who guards the home is always home. His life is her life. And it's actually kind of interesting. I think he's more popular than she is.
Every character has got a best friend. Even an awful best friend, or it may just be their bartender, you know, but everybody's got a best friend. Every character comes from a background. Every character loves somebody. And I think you need to know those things to make any character real, especially your side characters. You have to know what they want and who they love.
And the side characters also play a good role in mirroring the protagonist, because you're seeing qualities and you're seeing things about the protagonist that come out through the side characters rather than exposition, rather than just saying this. So I think a lot of times side characters play an important role in defining our main characters.
Getting back, the next two questions, they're ones I never really know how to answer, so I'm going to ask you guys. I know. Getting back to, this has kind of gone to good characters in general, but, getting back to the kick-ass aspect, if we're talking about these strong characters, which all of you write in different ways, what inspired you to write these characters? And you can pick one since, a lot of you write more than one. But people often want to know, where did that inspiration come from? Out of the blue, a person? Were you trying to prove something? There's so many different sources that these people can come from. We'll start with Christina this time.
For me, it was kind of a no-brainer because I think women kick ass every day. I mean, if you think about the way that most people go through their day, like, you get up in the morning, you get yourself ready, you get your kid ready for school, you go to work all day, you come home, you pick up your kids, you take them to karate or ballet or whatever, you make dinner, you do 5 loads of laundry, you answer all your emails, you kiss your husband and at least acknowledge you might want to have sex sometime in the future. And then, you go to sleep and you do it all the next day. Like, what's fighting a few demons? Like, after that, So, I mean, I don't think, for me, it was not a stretch to make a woman strong. I don't think that that we need to think about that. We are strong. It's not optional.
I want that on the t-shirt.
My mother always told me, and she was the wisest person I've ever known, she said, men, she said, but women can do whatever they have to do. They always can. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a high bar. But I have found it to be true. And when I write women, I write the kind of woman who does whatever is necessary, no matter how difficult that thing may be, because that's what women do. They do what they have to do. Sometimes it's unpleasant. Sometimes it's something they never want to do again. But they can do it because they're women. Yeah, I know that's oversimplifying.
I think that's very true. And one of the reasons I came up with Anna Strong was because I wanted a strong female that could overcome a tremendous adversity like being made a vampire and still try to remain human, try to retain some of that humanity that I think are, I was going to say that that's in all of us, but I don't believe that's true anymore. The older I get, the more I realize there is evil. there is evil. So, but I think that's probably the point in my book. A lot of the adversity, a lot of the villains that Anna fights in her book are they're not other vampires. They're not creatures. They're not monsters. They're other humans, because we do worse things to ourselves than any monster that we could dream up could do. So that was a part of what I was considering when I put together my character.
When I first started writing, which was really not that long ago, unless you ask my mom and friends from elementary school who say I've been writing forever, which is just not even factually correct, but they have decided that I did. I had gotten out of a relationship, a long-term relationship, and I was very, very broken up. And my solution was to read. And I read everything at this table, a lot, everything that I could find. And I wanted, I loved books and series. I loved paranormal books and series. I was pretty sure I was a Dark Hunter or a Dark Hunter's girlfriend. Third species that nobody knew about. So the first thing I wrote that I'm aware of writing was a little bit of fan fiction for Charlaine Kenyon's Dark Hunter series. Because I wanted to be in that world. I wanted to kind of, empower myself to make positive changes and be in that kind of situation. Now, after a week, I thought the logical, rational side of me kicked in. I thought, well, I'm never going to be able to show this to anybody. This seems very inefficient. Very inefficient thing to do. So I started writing. And I started writing characters that, you know, if there was some author out there that I could say, write this. This is the next thing I want to write. You know, I've read all the Suki Stackhouse. I've read all the Dark Hunters. I want to read this thing next. That's what I tried to write. So whatever motivation my characters had was because that's who I wanted to be at the time, and that's who I wanted to write about. So that there is a 28-year-old graduate student who suffers a loss and has to rebuild her life, I think is not a coincidence. And saying it out loud makes it actually sound, that actually sounds legitimate. I don't actually think that was a coincidence. Now that I think about it.
I came from a family of strong women, and so it wouldn't have occurred to me to write anything else. And when I say strong, I don't just mean physically strong. And just to give you a quick bit of backstory, my grandmother was married over 40 years. She'd been a housewife. That's what she did. And my grandfather, you know, ran around. And at one point, he told her, you know, either accept that I'm going to have a mistress or leave. And she said, I'm leaving. And he said, you'll have nothing. I have everything. You know, you'll be on the street. And she said, or you'll be on your ass on the street. And she said, it's my ass and I'll pick the street. And she left. And you know what?
That's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
And she, you know, ended up getting a job in her 60s and living out the rest of her life in the most incredible way without bitterness. And looking at that example, I didn't understand it at the time. I was young, so I hated his guts. And I didn't understand why she wasn't angry all the time. But I realized later it was her strength in leaving and her real strength in healing. And you'll see a lot of horrible things happen to my heroines, but they will find a way to heal. And I think that was inspired by seeing the different women in my family and what they went through.
That story gave me goosebumps.
I wish I'd saved this question to the end. We got a couple more here. And this is one I'm not even going to go down the line. Just anyone who wants to take a shot, because I never know personally when people expect me to answer for the whole industry, so I wouldn't expect you to. Urban fantasy is known for all these strong, kick-ass women and kick-ass characters in general. Is there anyone want to take a shot? Is there something unique about urban fantasy? What is it about this genre that has produced this crop of really strong characters?
I'll jump in. I think one of the reasons urban fantasy appeals to me is because it's our world with a twist. It's our world with other creatures living amongst us, and I really like that. And I always kind of think that I'm the I write in the Ira Levin Rosemary's Baby kind of genre, because you know I don't have the imagination, frankly, to write an epic fantasy where you start from scratch and you build a world that's wonderful and unique. But I like the idea of making our real world and the elements of the real worlds that are in the books so real that you can accept it, and you can also accept that you might have a vampire chief of police. You know, it's just, I just like that ability to, to say, what if your neighbor is a vampire? We don't really know. So that's, to me, that's the beauty of urban fantasy. That's what attracted me to write it.
And you think there's so many, where are all these kick-ass people coming from in urban fantasy? Or is that what happens when you have vampire chiefs of police?
Well, I think it's because we control so little in our real life. You know, we see so many injustices that we can't do anything about. Being able to write characters that can actually correct some of the injustices in the world is just a fantastic thing to do. And any aspiring writers out there, it's honestly, it's the best job I've ever had. I love writing it.
I think that's one of the reasons that the Star Trek world and the Star Wars world are so popular, is that people who, I think in many ways, would ordinarily feel themselves kind of relegated to not being important in society, who love those genres, find something that they relate to. They're fighting for a bigger cause, and even if they aren't capable in the real world of fighting for that same cause, it resonates with them. They're part of a team, they're fighting. And I think urban fantasy does that in a setting that's very familiar to people. There is a team in Chicagoland Vampires. There's the bad team. There's there's the opposites team, and I think people like to feel connected to something where you're fighting for a greater good, even if, you know, also you've got boyfriend troubles and you want to talk about bacon a lot.
I think it's the extremeness of the circumstances. I'm a horror movie buff, and when you have life and death and extreme circumstances, and then you throw in paranormal, it really brings out, it's make or break for the characters a lot of the times. And there's this Jeepers Creepers 2, not the first one, that sucked. But the second one, where one of the girls says to her boyfriend, who turns out to be a coward, you know, being really afraid is like being really drunk. It clearly brings out who you are. And in urban fantasy and in the paranormal, you have circumstances that are just, you know, it can be end of the world, or you know, monster's gonna literally eat you. And it brings out who you are. And so I think that with those extremes, it gives a chance for the characters to shine. The ones who are brave are really brave. And, you know, the ones who fight have to fight to their last bit of strength. And so it puts that magnifying glass on it, at least for me.
I agree, that's what I was thinking, is that, you know, Jeanine totally took my answer.
I'm sorry.
You know, just the idea that when you're, you know, if you're standing in an alley and there's a giant monster there that says they're going to rip you to shreds, well, what are you going to do? I mean, I don't think that as a writer that you can shy away from that. You know, you've chosen to write about this person, so are you going to have them run away? I don't think that's really an option.
Urban fantasy is fun because it's like our world but more interesting. And I think it also provides a great way to point out your point of view on social issues. At least I use it that way as a vehicle for my own opinions. And if you read the books and you get that, great. If you don't, I don't care. It's a good adventure. I'm no preacher. This was the only way I could think of to express how I feel about a lot of different issues. And I'm happy when people say, oh, you know, that started me thinking. Aren't vampires like oppressed minorities? And I'm going, yes, they are. They sure could be.
Yeah.
And then they say, did you plan that? That was a total accident.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap my questions up with kind of a free-for-all one here. So again, you know, we're trying to speak to aspiring writers out here. People are trying to figure out what is it that makes a good character or a strong character. What is just your best piece of advice for people writing when it comes to characters? And they don't necessarily have to be the leather-clad, ass-kicking type, or they can, but just if someone's writing, what should they know about characters? We'll pick on Jeanne again.
Learn to be a good eavesdropper. That's the main thing. I get so many ideas from being in a restaurant and listening to the conversation right behind me. And a lot of times, my husband will say, he'll be talking jabbering on, and all of a sudden he'll stop and he'll say, you haven't heard a single word I've said, have you? And he said, you're listening to those people behind us, aren't you? Well, yeah, because they're having a really good fight, and I want to throw out a line that I can use it. So.
I follow people all around department stores. Oh, yeah. They're having a good conversation. I'm just like, exactly. So, you know, be an observer. Observe what's going on around you and observe people and just have fun with it. You know, I wouldn't suggest stalking, but tend to rearrange the show.
Pretend to be security.
Write characters and not caricatures. The perfect heroine is, for the most part, not really that interesting, and I would say the same thing for the perfect hero. I mean, it's the flaws that make them human, for lack of a better word, who make them interesting, who make them appeal to us, because we want to know, can we fix the flaw? Can we overcome the flaw? Is he the unattainable hero who we can attain anyways? Is she the girl who's not that brave, who does the brave thing anyways? Because if you know they're brave from the get-go and everything they do is perfect, Personally, it's just not that interesting. So while it's important to give them strength and powers that we want to read about and which make the story exciting, it's the flaws that make them relatable, I think.
Yeah, I would echo that. If your character always makes the right decision, it never hurts anyone's feelings, never does something really dumb, they're not a real person, even real enough to be in a fiction story. So I would really echo the flaws. And yet, but still, I would go further and say even the villain thinks they're a hero. So while putting in those flaws, also realize no one is all the way evil either. I mean, even terrible people sometimes do good things or have good qualities, and you have to show all of it, or it's just not going to read any way that's going to invest a reader.
I think to be a really good writer of characters, you have to be a really good reader of characters. I think everything I know about writing characters I learned from reading Richard Russo and Jane Austen and Jim Butcher, who's my favorite writer. And I think that, the more you read, the more you see, the more you learn about your craft. If you want to be a writer, you need to be a reader.
I agree. Reading and observation of your fellow humans is the most important thing you can do. You have to even analyze people you really love, which can be kind of awful, and say, why are they doing that? What do they get out of it? What makes them tick? It's interesting, but it does make you feel a little separate from other people sometimes. But that's part of being a writer. What can I say? So read a lot, look a lot, listen a lot.
And write.
And
Too,
write.
because that's the one thing we haven't said, all of us, I'm sure everybody has had someone come up to them and say, someday I'm gonna write a book. Well, they're not.
And they know the whole plot.
And if you want to be a writer, you need to, if you have a new baby, if you have all these things going on in your life, you can take 15 minutes during the time the baby's asleep, you can get up 15 minutes earlier, and if you write a page a day, you've got a book. So writing is the most, just keep writing, keep at it.
I have a day job and have had a day job since I started writing. So every Chicagoland Vampires book and Dark Lead book has been written with a day job, and it's a 40-plus hour week day job.
Sure.
It can be done. You can do it, but you've got to get the butt in the chair.
Right.
And it sucks so hard sometimes.
All right. So we got a little bit of time here for 3:45. So we could take about 5 minutes for some questions, and then Jeanine will give away some books. So there's questions out there. They can be like for the whole panel if you want to give them to a specific person. Kind of make them character-ish so we can stay on topic. Yeah.
It's not so much of a question as a comment. One of the things that I really like about the kick-ass either hero or heroine is that I love seeing them like a burnt marshmallow, where they've got that tough exterior, but they're all gooey inside for their partner. They're that goo, and sometimes it slips off of the stick, and it plops and it cracks and you go, oh crap, and then you gotta, I'm telling you, but every one of you have written a character like that, and I just love it. I just had to say that you get my. I like that warm, gooey inside, but that tough exterior, that I just love it. So thank you all.
Are you a writer?
No, I'm a reader.
Other questions out there? Yeah.
I want to ask the same question I've asked the whole time, and you guys probably repeat. When you write, do you see visually or audible? And then when you have a block, what do you do? Because I heard the best one the other day that, is it Carr?
Mari Carr.
Mari Carr, when she got blocked, she would fill up the bathtub, get a snorkel, and go under the water.
Oh,
Was it
Melissa Marr.
Thank you.
Melissa
I said I
Marr.
couldn't
Excuse
remember
me.
who it
Yes,
was.
Melissa Marr.
So the two thing was, do you write visually, audibly? Do you hear the voices? Do you see it?
If it's going well, it plays out like a movie in my head, and I write down the dialogue as it happens. And I'm a fast typist, thank goodness, because sometimes it happens quickly. But it doesn't always happen that way, and sometimes sometimes I'm aware when I'm typing that the typing's kind of the vehicle for something that's playing out up here. Sometimes the typing is like this, and I'm just trying to get words on the page. For the block, I mean, there's things to do. I switch up, you know, writing with a pencil or a pen versus writing on my keyboard, but for the most part, I just have to keep pushing and write anyways, even if it's not something I want to write about or that I'm feeling inspired by.
I always say deadlines.
Yeah.
Deadlines are killer for mothers.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you have a deadline approaching, you really can't let yourself get stuck. You've got to, and as you plow through a difficult place, you'll know you're going to come back and revisit it. But the forward motion is like that shark. Yeah, the forward motion. You just have to keep moving forward.
To me, if you get blocked, it's a sign you've done something wrong. That you need to go back and find out where you went wrong, or at least in my case it is. I see it visually. If I'm stopped and I can't tell what to do next, I need to go back and find another path because I've taken the wrong turn in the road.
I see almost nothing. I hear everything. I hear the sound of my character's voice. I hear the dialogue. I heard her before I saw her. So actually filling in the blank spaces can be a challenge for me, but I don't really get blocked per se. I'm a runner and I run long, stupid distances, so when I'm running long, stupid distances, I'm usually thinking about the book in a really kind of loose way, and things usually, by the time I'm ready to sit down and write, I've usually thought of something, so I don't really get blocked.
I get blocked sometimes, and it depends. To go first question, sometimes I see it visually, sometimes I hear it, and sometimes it's only through forcing myself to sit and keep typing, even if I later go back and delete most of what I've written, but just the act of keep typing, no, you're not getting up yet. But I will, with a caveat, say sometimes I need to get up and leave the desk, and I'll go walk my dog or walk around, and I will verbally ask questions of myself, which I've learned to do that with a dog, because then people think you're talking to the dog, and it gives less concerned glances than when I would talk to myself going to get the mail and the neighbors. But anyway, sometimes that's helped for me, kind of just asking myself questions out loud. My husband now knows to ignore it. And sometimes it's just doing something fun or inspiring. Going to see a movie you wanted to see. I can't tell you how many times I'm doing something different and inspiration will strike. So there are, most of the time it's cured by forcing myself to sit at the keyboard. Sometimes it's cured by walking away. And it's really hard to determine which is which. And that's the struggle.
Okay, we're just about time. We got a few minutes left. Just in time to give away some books. How many do you have?